Richard I, 1189 to 1199. Richard the Lionheart, the medieval equivalent of that guy who buys a sports car to compensate for his shortfalls, his vaunted reputation for bravery and chivalry, a clever smokescreen for being an almost perpetually absent king. Instead of ruling England, Richard spent most of his reign on a glorified European vacation, traipsing around Europe and the Middle East like some kind of medieval globetrotter. Let's start with the basics. Richard spoke barely any English. Yes, the lion-hearted King of England couldn't be bothered to learn the language of his own subjects. He preferred the more sophisticated sounds of French, making him quite the foreigner in his own kingdom. When he wasn't off on his self-indulgent crusades, leaving his kingdom to fend for itself, he managed to get himself captured by the Duke of Austria. Yes, the heroic Lionheart spent a good chunk of his reign as a prisoner, demanding a ransom so colossal it makes today's celebrity bailouts look like pocket change. His subjects were bled dry to fund his reckless escapades and to pay off his humiliating ransom. Speaking of the Crusades, Richard's participation in the Third Crusade was a grand display of Don Quixote-like gallantry. He achieved some victories, but ultimately failed to retake Jerusalem, the whole point of the crusade. But hey, at least he got to parade around in shining armor and bask in the adulation of bards and minstrels who conveniently glossed over his less glamorous moments. Back home, his brother John was busy scheming and betraying him. While Richard was off playing the gallant knight, John was undermining his authority and plotting to seize the throne. The Lionheart's trust in his treacherous brother was yet another testament to his poor judgment. And let's not forget his foolhardy death. Richard met his end not in a grand battle, but from an infected wound inflicted by a mere peasant with a crossbow. After all those years of daring exploits and narrow escapes, his life was cut short by a peasant's lucky shot. Talk about anticlimactic. His lasting legacy? Oh, just the small matter of squeezing every last penny from his people to finance his incessant warmongering and cover his own colossal blunders. Richard the Lionheart, folks. The absentee king who turned England into his personal ATM. What a guy! John, 1199 to 1216. And now we move on to Richard's illustrious successor, the infamous Lackland King John. Where to even begin with this petulant man-child of a monarch? John was a masterclass in royally screwing the pooch, turning incompetence into an art form. This king's legacy is a laundry list of failures and blunders that would make even the worst rulers blush. First off, John managed to alienate the nobility by overtaxing them to the point of rebellion. He was so adept at making enemies that he couldn't even keep his own family safe. The suspicious disappearance and probable murder of his nephew Arthur, a potential rival, is just one dark stain on his already soiled reputation. But wait, there's more. John got England excommunicated by the Pope, turning the entire kingdom into a spiritual pariah. His spat with Pope Innocent III was like a medieval soap opera, with John stubbornly refusing to accept the Pope's nominee for Archbishop of Canterbury. The resulting excommunication was a public relations disaster that further cemented John's status as a royal screw-up. John's military prowess was equally abysmal. His reign saw England getting its ass kicked by the French, losing significant territories in Normandy and other parts of France. His military campaigns were a series of humiliations, showcasing his knack for turning potential victories into crushing defeats. And then there's his pièce de résistance, levying those onerous taxes that enraged the barons into open revolt. His insatiable greed and mismanagement led to the rebellion that forced him to sign the Magna Carta in 1215. This great charter was a monumental embarrassment for John, effectively stripping him of some of his powers and laying the groundwork for constitutional limits on the monarchy. Thanks to King Tuphet, we got that troublemaking document that's been a thorn in every tyrant's side ever since. Finally, let's talk about his inglorious end. John's death was as ignominious as his life. In 1216, while fleeing from a French invasion and his own rebellious barons, he managed to lose his treasure in the Wash, a tidal estuary in East Anglia. Then he succumbed to dysentery, a humiliating end for a king already renowned for his failures. Some accounts suggest he gorged himself on peaches and cider, which might have contributed to his demise. It was a fittingly inglorious death for a king whose reign was marked by sheer incompetence and disaster. In summary, King John was the medieval monarch equivalent of a walking disaster. His reign was marked by incompetence, betrayal, and an uncanny ability to turn allies into enemies. England's Lackland left a legacy of failure that historians and satirists alike can marvel at. What a guy.